Waihaskahel, Kisnaxil, Esquis, Asiut. Our Silicon language, that's simply good day, my dear friends and relatives. My traditional name is Asiut. I want to begin by acknowledging Treaty 6 people, and express my gratitude for having the privilege to be here this afternoon, I guess. I'm absolutely wiped out. It's pretty early this morning. But at any rate, I became aware of this conference some time ago and was asked if I'd be willing to attend. And I want everybody to know my primary purpose for coming was anything to do with climate change, global warming, the environment, protecting and defending Mother Earth is something that I believe is deserving of our full support. So I immediately agreed to come out here. Had really no idea in any great detail what the hopes of the organizers were for the outcome of this gathering. But I do want to thank the organizers for their visionary leadership, for their integrity, for knowing and understanding the need to organize events like this. Without question, climate change, global warming, and everything that represents is, without question, the biggest issue of our time. There's no doubt about that. And I've often thought that these conferences, these meetings, should happen in the middle of the summer, when all of the forest fires are happening, when the floods are happening. Because then people, at that point in time when their outbuildings are burning down and their homes are being flooded and so on and so forth, they wake up to the reality of climate change. When they're watching the Southwest and California burn up, they grudgingly admit that climate change and global warming is a reality. But pretty much for the rest of the year, they just go on with their lives and their business and so on and so forth, and sit in front of their televisions and watch that, what some people have called industrial porn, where it shows those wonderful slice of life commercials with somebody fishing in the stream, somebody camping, and it really grabs your attention until at the end it says sponsored by Suncor, or sponsored by Enbridge, or whatever. And those commercials attempt to convince us that all of the devastation that they wreak on the environment, on Mother Earth, is somehow mitigated through their wonderful reparations and mitigation plans, which we all know is crap. I was just up in Prince Rupert. I was up in Prince Rupert Friday and Saturday. We had a huge gathering up there. There was over 300 people. What was interesting about that gathering is it centered on the Petronas LNG proposal for Lilu Island. And the hereditary leadership gathered together, and they had drafted up a declaration. And the declaration essentially talks about, from this time forward, for all time, Lilu Island will be forever protected from any kind of development. It will be preserved for future generations. The conference itself, the gathering, was entitled Salmon Nation Summit. And it was incredibly powerful to walk into that room and see so many deeply committed people that were willing to declare what we heard about from our elder earlier about what our responsibilities are to Mother Earth, what our teachings instruct us to do, to be able to commit that to a document and have all of the hereditary leaders in their regalia get up and sign off on that document. And it was, there were 3 MLAs there from the provincial government, and there was 1 MP. And they were part of a panel, and they signed off on the declaration. As president of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and our vice president, Chief Bob Chamberlain, being invited guests and all, we signed off on the declaration, but it was incredibly powerful. And it's going to be interesting to see how the BC government and Petronas reacts to that declaration, because it was a line in the sand without question. About a week before that, I was up in Treaty 8 territory, and I was at what's known as the Rocky Mountain Fort Camp. And it's a camp along the Peace River, and there's a handful of young people, young ladies, and landowners, and other land stewards that have set this camp up, and they're holding at bay this enormous industrial effort to begin to do the preparatory work to prepare for the Site C dam. And parked all over are these enormous bulldozers, these tree cutters. I had a picture of myself taken next to a tree that was bigger than that corner post in the middle of the room there. And what BC Hydro is doing through their contractors is going in and just cutting down all these trees, and the cottonwoods and those kinds of trees are just grinding up into the ground. It's an absolute moonscape up there. And every year I would go up to the Peace and participate in what's known as Paddle for the Peace. And there'd be over 200 canoes go in the water. And there would be people from all across Turtle Island, from down in the US, from other countries would come and support that event, just to demonstrate the enormous opposition to the Site C dam proposal. And the provincial government, the Christy Clark government through BC Hydro, is trying to attempt to convince everybody that somehow this is a green project, and that it's in the best interests of British Columbians. The fact of the matter is, it is not. It underwent the Canadian Environmental Assessment Joint Review Panel process, and the Joint Review Panel did not endorse the dam. Rather, the panel said that BC Hydro had not made the case for the demand, for the need for the energy or the power. And furthermore, the Joint Review Panel said that there was not sufficient financial data in order to determine viability of the project, and recommended that the project be turned over to the BC Utilities Commission. It's a $9 million project. It should have been reviewed by the BC Utilities Commission at the outset, but the Clark government, in a very underhanded and unethical way, exempted it from the BCUC review process. We're having a devil of a time in British Columbia with the heavy oil pipeline proposals. Enbridge's Northern Gateway pipeline proposal. I believe now there's either 17 or 19 lawsuits that have been filed against that particular project. And it's pretty much been torpedoed so many times by so many different groups that public opinion is such that it's dead in the water. The Trudeau government came in and announced a tanker ban along the north coast. And so all of those things considered, and somebody mentioned a court case earlier this morning where the courts agreed that Enbridge failed in their legal obligation to consult. So Enbridge's Northern Gateway pipeline proposal is pretty much dead in the water. The other proposal that we're fighting is Kinder Morgan, Texas-based corporation, their Trans Mountain Pipeline project, which started out as roughly 300,000 barrels a day. And when Enbridge started going under, they modified their application up to 900,000 barrels per day. And that's run into some pretty serious problems. The NEB process is taking place in Burnaby. Pretty much every day there's been a rally and a march, and a lot of good people have come out and condemned the NEB process as an outright fraud. There's been all kinds of appeals to the Trudeau government to follow through on its commitments to engage in any process or decision that does not meet the standards of accommodating or taking into consideration Indigenous rights. And so just within the last few days, the Kinder Morgan project has had some really difficult times. The provincial government has publicly come out and said they can't support the project because it doesn't meet the 5 conditions. So that's the second proposal. So it's the heavy oil pipelines and LNG that we're dealing with along with the Site C Dam. And all of those particular campaigns, those projects, have a dimension of climate change, global warming, protecting and saving the environment. I had an opportunity this summer to go into the Unistoten camp, which is up in Wet'suwet'en territory. And what compelled me to go into the camp, very controversial issue up there between the Wet'suwet'en people, but we were informed that the RCMP were mobilizing a force of 200 officers, and they were going to go in and take down the camp. And so we began to reach out to different organizations, different federal officials, federal party leaders, and over the space of about 2 days, there was a statement that was drawn up, and within, I think, 12 hours, we had 400 signatories. But the main thing that stopped the raid was they were outed, and they were filling up all of the motels in the area, ready to go in. And when the general public became aware that they were actually there and that was their intention, there was such an uproar about it. They had to disengage and demobilize, and needless to say, the RCMP hasn't spoken to me since because that information was relayed to us, and God knows they actually expected us not to say anything about it. But of course, you know, we had a duty and obligation to the people in the camp. The Rocky Mountain Fort Camp up in the Site C Dam construction footprint, they've been served within the last few days, and that issue is absolutely unbelievable because we have CSIS agents going to people's homes in an effort to intimidate them. The band councils are so fearful they will not send a text, an email, or speak about it publicly, or engage in a telephone conversation for fear of being under surveillance about the Site C Dam proposal. It's absolutely amazing the extent that the Christy Clark government is going through to ram this proposal through. Clearly the power that would be generated by the Site C Dam is not going to power up residences. It's going to go into LNG or some further large-scale resource development. And those are the kinds of things that are happening in British Columbia. We all know that last year was the hottest summer on record. And we're all aware of the devastation of the forest fires and all of those issues, the complete drying up of rivers and streams, the enormous impact it's had on wild salmon, and so on and so forth. So those are the reasons that these discussions that are taking place here today are important. And we have, we're blessed with having in-house expertise, so to speak, in the form of many Indigenous leaders who have been involved in this issue for decades and who had the foresight to know that this was coming and have worked very, very hard. I had the honor of doing the Tarzan's Healing Walk, and I'm so grateful that I was able to do that and actually smell and taste the ugliness of what that development represents. Like everybody else, I've seen it on TV, but walking right through the middle of it, is one heck of an experience. So, sadly, our mainstream political organizations are not on the same page as we are. Some of them are, but I would suggest that the majority of them are not. And when I went into the Innistoten camp, I was totally crucified for doing that, because there are the councils that are entering into benefit agreements and agreements of different types of agreements with the companies. And when I came down off the mountain that day, there was about 25, 30 people waiting for me. Indigenous peoples who actually work in the industry. And, I had my ears ripped off for about 3 hours. And they were totally emotional and they were sincere. And, many of them said it was the first full-time employment they had, and so on and so forth. And I understood that, certainly. But at the same time, I know what those projects represent. And I was asked to appear before their band councils at the dinner, and was pretty much roasted, again, for going in and supporting the camp. But if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't hesitate to go back up there tomorrow and undermine any attempts. At the gathering we had in Prince Rupert a couple days ago, a lady got up and said she was told by a member of the RCMP in the strictest confidence that the RCMP are training here in Alberta to take down the camps. And I totally believe that. I believe they're that stupid that they think they can go in there and take down those camps and that everybody will simply go home. So my sense is what's happening with what happened in Paris, and all the warts and pimples associated with that, and the incoming Trudeau government, and that there's a growing awareness of what climate change and global warming represents, and how devastating and destructive it is. And I think people are beginning to know and understand that it's not going to go away. Like last summer was not a one-off. It's going to get worse. And we're going to lose our rivers. Rivers that have flowed for thousands of years are going to dry up. And so I think that, we have that going for us. There's, as most of you know, there's an energy conference in Vancouver sponsored by AFN. I've read that agenda I don't know how many times, and it breaks my heart because climate change, global warming, the environment is not to be found on that agenda. It's all about how to engage industry, how to achieve the best impact benefit agreement and things of that nature. And that's where our mainstream conventional political institutions are at the moment. But I think as time goes on with younger people getting involved and people that are better informed about these issues are going to start to make a difference. But that won't happen unless we have these kinds of conversations that are taking place here. It must have been about a month and a half ago or whatever, we had a climate march in Vancouver. And that was just absolutely great. It was just totally short notice. But we had hundreds and hundreds of people out marching through the streets of Vancouver. And that's what we need to work toward, not only in Vancouver, but in all the major cities. It's a campaign, it's a fight, it's a battle. And when we have an opportunity to do whatever we can to support in whatever way we can, I absolutely believe, as a grandfather of 15 grandchildren, we have a duty and an obligation, a sacred duty, an obligation to support that work, to support this emerging movement. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to be here. When I go home, I'll carry the knowledge that there are a lot of good people that continue to dedicate their life's work to these important issues. There's a lot of people in this room that I loosely describe as the usual suspects, and it's really good to see all of you. To know you're still there. You're still carrying far more than your share of this fight. And on behalf of my grandchildren, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, being part of this fight. Why?